Welcome to the Big Fundamental Podcast, a San Antonio Spurs podcast brought to you by Kens 5, the official TV station of the Spurs. I am Jackson Floyd, and joining me this week, he's been described as the eye candy of the podcast. Of course, that is a audio format. How you doing today, Tom Petrini?
Yo, I'm good. Thank you for the compliment. I have more room to shine now that Joe and Jeff are not with us today, but, somebody has to be the handsome one, and it's not going to be so.
That's fair. I am older and wiser and all those things as well. Yes, of course, last week we were the Fantastic Four with Joe Ryan-Egel and Jeff Garcia from Locked On Spurs with us. This week we're Batman and Robin. We'll let you decide who's whom.
This is one that only certain analysts for a certain network could get wrong. So.
There you go. Hey, there's a lot to talk about, really. I mean, there wasn't a lot of newsworthy things per se off the top, but man, there's a lot to dive into with the Spurs right now in terms of where they are heading into the season. We're less than 2 months away from preseason training camp. Right around the corner here will be the start of the season as well. I believe the first game is October 20th, 2021. So just right around the corner. As we dive into that, first of all, just want your opinion on the reports from New York Times' Mark Stein. Gregg Popovich, who is 26 wins away from being the all-time winningest NBA head coach in basketball history. Maybe a couple more words in there as well as you describe his standing in there. 26 games away from passing his friend Don Nelson. Reportedly wants to do that. Is this a duh? Are you surprised at all by that statement?
No. I think that anybody who is in a position like that where, it's hard to have a career as special as Gregg Popovich.
Yeah.
That's why not many people have done it. That's why he's here at the top of this mountaintop almost. And I read that report and it was like, he wants this a lot more than he'd like for you to think that he wants it, which, sure, that makes sense. But also nobody would hold it against Gregg Popovich for wanting that.
Yeah.
Because, that's a pretty good way to, talk about his life's work.
Yeah.
You don't get into a career like this. You don't stay good in a career like this for as long as Gregg Popovich has if you don't have that competitive side to you. I know that the record probably means less to him than, his friendship with Nelly, but Nelly wants him to break the record, and I'm sure the two have had a lot of fun conversations about that over a nice bottle of wine. So, I think that it's absolutely something that he wants and he should want.
Yeah. Sure, the mantra that is always ascribed to Popovich, and he'll tell it to you too, is life is bigger than basketball, right? There's things like that, but that doesn't mean he doesn't want to succeed at basketball. That doesn't mean that he doesn't appreciate the greatness that he has reached and the pinnacle he's reached and doesn't want to go further. We've seen how much the game means to him and these achievements mean to him as recently as when they won the gold medal. We talked about it last week, that video that came out from JaVale McGee's video blog, and I think it's safe to say also as well that no one has heard from JaVale McGee since that, so
Gulag.
We don't know what happened there. But he was so impassioned and was almost brought to tears when talking about how much that win meant to him and what that team went through. And I think you're going to see a lot of that this season as he nears that pinnacle as well as being the winningest basketball coach of all time. But you're right. He still is going to value the friendships more. And maybe it's a nice bottle of wine. Maybe it's whatever Don Nelson's been growing in Hawaii. I'm sure they do talk about a lot about that as well. So,
I bet Pop is a once I'm retired guy. I'm kidding. We'll cut that part.
Maybe we won't. We'll see. But this report almost feels like it comes from a place where, the off season has reached that point where we are, we've gotten through trade deadline. We've gotten through the draft. We've gotten through free agency. We've gotten all the big meaty bites of the offseason are out of the way, and so this is kind of the little nibbles that you got to fill the time and the space in.
We're at it's the middle of August, end of August, which means it's like prime time for hyping up Ben Simmons jump shot open gym videos like we do every August for the last 5 years. That's basically where we're at in the content cycle, I think.
I haven't seen a Ben Simmons miss on my Twitter timeline in months, so that's where we are. I also posted a video of myself shooting. Please compare and contrast Ben Simmons and I. We're both lefties. Maybe we both shouldn't be lefties. I don't know. We'll see. Remains to be seen. I made 2 of my shots, so there you go. that doesn't mean that, I mean, sure, we're in the nibbly stage, we're talking about Ben Simmons jump shots, but the most notable thing I think that happened in the last week since we last talked was the NBA schedule came out. And that I think kind of puts a little bit of a framework around where the expectations might be for the San Antonio Spurs this season. The first thing that stood out to me for the Spurs schedule, looking at it for the first time, was it seems like a slog. Right? Looking at the first 8 games in particular, 6 of them are against playoff teams. Like, that's going to be brutal. They play Milwaukee, they play Dallas, they play the Lakers. They play Milwaukee twice in the first 8 games.
The thing is, honestly, this might be a little zig when they zag thing. Might be the hopeless optimist in me. Hopeful optimist. But if you got to play Milwaukee twice anyway, right?
Yeah.
You might as well do it at the beginning of the year when maybe they're still figuring some stuff out. And I know they just won the title, but maybe they got a little championship hangover. Maybe they're not getting up for the game against the Spurs. And, maybe Bryn Forbes comes through with a crazy revenge game.
Ooh, I like that narrative.
Would be fun.
Yeah, I mean, they might still be in celebration mode, exactly. So.
Right. And, same thing with the Lakers, and you got Dallas in there twice as well. Like, they're talented teams, but they're also teams that might be still trying to figure some things out.
For sure.
For sure, the Spurs are going to be trying to figure things out too. But, there's a little bit, I think in the beginning of the season, there's a little bit more of a chance for those, like, oh, that was weird, kind of upsets to happen. So,
there is something to be said, though, about, like, if you're playing Milwaukee, play them now. If you're playing Dallas twice in the first 8 games, this is also a good time. I mean, they're bringing in an entirely new coaching roster, right? Jason Kidd. Right. They recently just brought Jared Dudley in, who retired, and he's going to be on that bench. If you're going to play a pickup game, I think I saw Locked On Mavericks, Nick, the host there, tweeting about if you're going to play a pickup game between coaching rosters, you probably don't want. Yeah, it's the Mavericks and then it's everyone else based on the talent they have. Whether or not that translates to good coaching, we'll see. But it's a whole new rotation.
Back when Timmy was on the Spurs coaching staff, different story. Timmy and Becky running pick and roll down your throat, like, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But that on court coaching would be. But yeah, like they're going to the beginning of any year, teams are going to be adjusting. Everybody's got new pieces. Everybody's going to be trying to figure out how they work together and how to optimize what they've got. So. There is a good chance that at least one of those games falls the Spurs' way, I think.
Yeah. Now, if they're facing 6 playoff games in the first 8, maybe you think that it gets easier as the schedule goes on. There's a reason why they're ranked the second hardest schedule in the league. They've got 2 road trips of at least 7 games on the road consecutively. I mean, we always talk about the road trip as being kind of a slog, but if you look at the stretch from December 17th at Utah through January 10th when they're playing New York, the Knicks there. I mean, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 of 15 on the road, including a 7-game stretch between the 30th and the 31st and the 10th, where they start the new year on the road. Like, that just feels like just an extra burden on this team right ahead of the rodeo road trip. I mean, it's going to be a slog. To me, what the schedule release did was lower the bar as to what I think would be a successful season for the Spurs. And I wonder if they're not in playoff or play-in contention anymore. I would have imagined them just being just under 500 to finish the year before the schedule came out. I dropped them a couple of games based on the schedule. Now I'm looking at maybe 32, 50, 34, 48 in that range. Which puts them towards the cellar of the league. So, I mean, but it also puts them above the win total that Vegas is expecting. What were your takeaways? Does this lower the bar for the Spurs here?
I think it makes the path a little more difficult. Mm-hmm. But my expectations for the Spurs this season, were never about who are they going to play and what's the schedule look like. It's really going to be a question of, can this team with the pieces that they have compete right now as they're developing toward a team that can compete? Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be the case. I think that they're going to surprise a lot of people, team side, media side, fan side, who are just like, oh, how are the Spurs not getting blown out in these games? They lost, the 3 players whose names I know, and it's going to be. I think I believe that this young core is going to be pretty competitive and bring a lot of defense that was lacking last year. And, I don't think they're going to – I don't know if they're going to be I think they're going to be fighting for a play-in spot, somewhere in that 7 to 10 range, and that's how I felt before the schedule drop. That's how I feel after. There are some really long and really inconvenient travel here, because I was looking. I was like, what trips could I maybe sell here? New Year's Eve they play in Memphis. New Year's Day they're in Detroit. Less than 24 hours later.
Skipping over the pond, right? So that's an easy flight to make after that game.
That is terrible. And they're like, there's a lot in here that's like, whew. And obviously, NBA's tough. Like there are teams that I'm circling on this schedule that you didn't have to circle last year, and now it's like, it's going to be a tougher game than it was last year.
There may be winnable games in here too, and this is not kind of the reflection you always want to put in your team, but as teams look at their schedule and they see, we've got, a back-to-back and the Spurs are on the back end of that as well, the Spurs might be the team that coaches are circling and general managers are circling, saying, hey, we need to get some rest because the whole season's going to be a grind. Maybe we take some guys against the Spurs. And so that kind of plays into the wins and losses as well for the team as well.
And it also might be, sort of the reverse of that, where it's like, we're playing this team, we got to beat them. Like, and the Spurs have had a lot of games in the past couple of years where they lost to teams that they shouldn't have lost to. So I think that's going to be a big part of the schedule as well, because the games that they should win are not locks.
The game that haunts me to this day, it's an old one, but a good one. The final game of the season lost to the Pelicans that dropped them from a 2 or 3 seed to the 7 seed. Then they play the Clippers in the first round and lose in 7 games there. That one still lingers in the back of the mind. I saw someone recently post as Marvel's What If airs on Disney Plus, what's a what if basketball correlation you can make? And there's a couple that popped to Spurs' minds. I tweeted out one about, rebound by Bosch, back out to Allen. Off the rim,
traumatizing us right now.
I know it's a what if. It's different. The outcome changes.
Perfectly nice afternoon here.
So I mean that Pelicans game might not be top 3 for my what if situation scenarios, but it definitely rounds up the top 5. I think in terms of games that I'd like to forget. Like you're saying, they're winnables, they're losables. Sometimes you lose the winnable ones. So
take care of business games. I'm more interested in those games, honestly, than I am in the ones where they're going to be punching up.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if they can take care of business against the other teams that, aren't being thought of very highly around the league, I think that will be a good sign for them.
Yeah. Spurs will have to take care of business. Meanwhile, the front office is taking care of business in their own right. This week, they officially announced that Bryn Forbes had signed his contract. He is back in San Antonio, a place he called his second home. He's wearing the number 7 on the front of his jersey this time around. Tom, what are your thoughts on bringing Bryn back in, and why do you think there's so much hate around the move?
Well, I think that Bryn Forbes is a very polarizing player for Spurs fans, a lot of whom got sick of watching him get killed on defense his last time here. And I'm here to tell you, I was one of those people. It's a different team, and it's surely going to be a different role for Bryn Forbes this time around. I've been using this metaphor to talk about Bryn Forbes for a while now, but starting Bryn Forbes, and not just starting him, but he played the 3rd most minutes on the team outside of, it was DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge and Bryn Forbes. And that was on a team that also had Patty Mills and Marco Bellinelli taking minutes. Every team needs one guy, who his whole job is to come off the bench and shoot threes, and if that's all he does, he's done his job. Spurs had 3 of those guys, and one of them was playing the 3rd most minutes on the team. It wasn't sustainable. It didn't work. It was like if you were going on a camping trip and as a go-to knife, instead of a Leatherman, you took a scalpel. That's not what it's for. But, if you're doing surgery, which one do you want, right?
Yeah.
So with the Bucks, we saw Bryn Forbes in more of that, surgical role. He was coming off the bench. He played 19 minutes a game, 10 points. Shot 45% from 3. The Spurs had a guy who that was his job, Patty Mills, He's playing for the Nets now. I kind of think it makes perfect sense to bring him back in a limited role. And the people that are upset that he's back, I don't think have really truly grasped how the roster is different. And, the Spurs have very clearly cleared the runway for more opportunities for these young guys.
Yeah.
So I can guarantee he's not going to play the third most minutes on this team. I can all but guarantee that he won't start. It would shock me if he started.
Yeah. I mean, the Spurs lost DeRozan, they lost Gay, they lost Mills. That was a lot of scoring for this team. But what it also was, it represents the most corporate knowledge this team has. And that's a phrase that Pop, and an asset that Pop finds very valuable. Bringing a guy in who's been in the system when DeJounte Murray is your longest tenured Spurs is a good move.
You know who was there the first year with DeJounte Murray? Bryn Forbes.
Exactly. And he spoke to that too. He's played with these guys. He knows this young core. That's going to be really valuable. I like him in the Patty Mills position. The Spurs team was one that really needs shooting. And if you're going to bring in a guy to shoot the ball, he's one of the better guys to do it. I'm just going to read off some Spurs PR stats to you, courtesy of Jordan Howenstein. Just kind of put this in perspective. Of course, this is PR. They're only tweeting the good stuff about Bryn Forbes, but he's only one of 3 players to make 153 pointers while shooting over 45% from long range last season. He was the third best guy alongside Joe Harris and Joe Ingles, right? In 5 career seasons, he's made 584 3-pointers, shooting 41% from long range. Only 10 players have done better than that. Like, he is one of the 11 or 12 best 3-point shooters in the league. He's a good guy to have on your side. So I think it's a good, valuable move for them, like you're saying, as long as he's not, called on to be the defensive reliability. We tweeted a graphic out about how he was always open, and there were numerous comments being like, well, so is this defender. Well, when he's defending the 7th best guy in a team, that's okay.
Right, exactly. When you're in the starting lineup, there is nowhere to hide. And, sometimes when you're in the game, there's nowhere to hide. Like, he straight up got played off the floor in the finals just because the Suns figured him out and started targeting him. They were just going at him with pistol screens, and Bud made a decision, was like, we're going to go with a little more defensive upside, and they needed that.
Yeah.
But just because that happened doesn't mean that he can't be a really good regular season contributor. When the Spurs get to the finals this year, maybe they'll bench Bryn. I don't know, but we'll worry about that when we get to it. All right, he can contribute on this team. He has skills that this team desperately needs help with. So, and a lot of people were joking, like, oh yeah, championship experience Bryn. Really though, championship experience Bryn, and he's coming back, and he's one of the older players on this team.
Elder statesman Bryn Forbes.
That's pretty wild to say, but he does have that corporate knowledge, and that is important. I don't think it merits more than 18 minutes a game.
Yeah,
just because Pop is bringing in some guy with corporate knowledge, that doesn't mean he's going to play him more. We've seen a lot of people be critical, and a lot of times rightfully so, in my opinion, about Pop and the coaching staff giving more opportunity to guys who have been there longer, know the system more, but have less upside than some of the younger players that they're trying to bring along. So I'm fascinated to see how the dynamic works out this year with the rotation.
I mean, speaking of that championship experience too, we put quotes around that, or we kind of giggle at that a little bit. But I mean, at the very least, he can show everyone the ring and show you how good it felt to win that. I mean,
Pop can never take that away from him.
Yeah,
never take that away. It's to all the haters out there. It is NBA champion Bryn Forbes to you.
Popovich can come in and lay his 5 rings on the table, but I'm sure the one that Bryn Forbes is showing DeJounte Murray means more to Murray. Or that experience means it's going to make Murray thirstier for it, right? So
as a motivational thing, it's, and when Bryn signed, people were like, oh man, that would be funny if he won a ring, but he did, and I bet it's not funny to Bryn Forbes. I bet it's one of the best things that's happened to him.
Yeah.
Speaking of best things that have happened to Bryn Forbes, read in Jeff McDonald's piece about him coming back. He has a home here that he didn't sell because his kids continued to live here.
It's amazing.
Go to school, and San Antonio is it's his second home because he spent so much time here, but he's also chosen it. He's one of those guys who is, chosen to be here. And I think especially given the abuse that he took, because it wasn't his fault that he was playing the third most minutes on the team. That wasn't his choice. And there were a lot of people that were mad at him about it, and it's not his fault, but he caught a lot of flack. And, for him to love being here and want to come back after having the option to just go back to the Bucks, maybe make a little bit more money than he's making here, and go for a second title.
Yeah.
He wanted to be here. So I think that speaks to his commitment to the team and how much he wants to be here in San Antonio, which I think is always a wonderful thing to see.
Exactly. And I mean, he's already made appearances with Keldon Johnson at a public event as well. So I think he's just really found himself ingrained with this young core again. Bryn Forbes back in the building. Now there's a few names attached to the Spurs this offseason involved in moves who haven't officially been announced by the Spurs as members of the Silver and Black. I'm thinking of Thaddeus Young, Al-Farouq Aminu, Chandler Hutchinson, another guy who is, I think, a throw-in on the Doug McDermott trade, if I'm not mistaken, or he was involved in one of those four-man trade swings where the Spurs found a piece to get in there.
I think it was the five-man trade, and they got a second-round pick also with him.
Yeah, that was the one that was kind of the head scratcher. They got a second-round pick for nothing.
They traded Milutinov's draft rights.
That's right.
Milutinov, who they took and has been a draft and stash since he got drafted 6 years ago. So
yeah. So Chandler Hutchinson, another guy who's been attached to a move that's been announced but not officially in the building. That this kind of leans towards the idea that there's more moves to be made, right? Maybe these guys are connected to trades. Maybe there's trying to work out some roster space or cap room to officially bring Thad Young into the building. What do you see from this? What does this mean to you? Is there another guy who's on the move? Which of these three guys are going to be on the team at the season's start?
Well, so the Spurs right now have 17 guys on their roster. So, there are people asking, is there going to be another move? There has to be another move of some sort.
Yeah.
Whether it's cut two players on guaranteed contracts, waive them, or a trade. A trade obviously makes more sense because you get something back. So I'm positive that the Spurs are exploring a bunch of options. The question is, who would they target, what would they get back, and what would they be giving up? I think if you're going to cut two guys, the two that make the most sense are Hutchison and Aminu.
Yeah.
They have the least overlap with what this team needs, and Aminu hasn't played really. He was hurt. He's on an expiring deal. If they go that route, that's probably what'll happen. But Aminu is also a pretty nice trade chip. Expiring deal, 9 minutes. He's a good trade chip for the reason that he was included in that DeMar DeRozan trade because it makes the salaries work. And so, if the Spurs were trying to acquire a player and send out draft picks or something else, Aminu could be a piece that makes sense. Thad Young, he also fits that mold of making $10-ish million a year on an expiring deal. The thing is, he's a far more serviceable player.
Yeah.
So, if they're making a bigger trade, it would probably make sense to include Thad Young. But I think that they'll be trying to make a trade rather than just get to camp and cut two guys. That would be very anticlimactic.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we kind of danced around it a little bit right there, but the bigger trade they've been tied to all offseason is one for Ben Simmons. And both Thad Young and Al-Farouq Aminu could be pieces in that, alongside whether it's all the names been mentioned, every single member of the Spurs young core and those guys. I don't know if this means that the Spurs are specifically trading for Simmons, but they're trading for somebody, right? That's the idea here, or trading for assets that they can further on down the road. Maybe it's draft picks or things like that, some other capital as well.
They've accumulated the assets, right? Yeah. They're posturing for a trade. Yeah. I don't know. The thing is, Spurs Black Ops, right? I don't know what they're after. It's a mystery.
Yeah.
And, I don't really see a Ben Simmons deal happening.
Yeah.
The way I see it happening if it does happen, is like he's driven his price down so much because he's like, I'll only go to, L.A. or the other L.A. or Golden State, and they're like, okay, we're gonna send you to Central Texas. No Kardashians there. Deal with it.
We've got Selena Gomez though, so
But how often is she courtside though?
Good point.
So, and then if that's the case, and the asking price is so low, where they're just like, we gotta dump him, and get like, if we get a fax machine back, I just don't see the value getting that low because he is still a good player. He will have value somewhere, but like, I don't know. The situation there seems pretty irreparable.
Yeah.
Like I can't see that working long term. But if nothing happens before the start of the season, I mean, you have until the trade deadline to make a trade. That's why it's called the trade deadline. So, I think it makes sense for the Spurs to hold on to as many trade chips as they can until the trade deadline because there is a move to be made. I'm not sure what it is, but like just looking at the depth chart, there are good players who might not see playing time this year just because there's a lot like they went out and got depth.
Yeah.
They could have used the cap space to go after some of the premier free agents out there, and instead they got a bunch of different guys who can do more specialist roles, but like all serviceable players who I think fit well with the young core. It's just who's going to play, who's not going to play.
Yeah, I mean, without going out and trading for Ben Simmons or Damian Lillard is another guy who's another disgruntled star. I mean, what they did was decide to replace DeMar DeRozan and Rudy Gay and Patty Mills for a lesser extent with depth, right? And that presents its own question here. Like, where do they go from this point on? How do they replace him in the rotation, in the lineup? I mean, just pulling some stats out. Last year, they scored 111 points per game. They lost the producers of 59% of those points between DeRozan, between Gay, Mills, even Gordy Jang added to that. I'm also including LaMarcus Aldridge's points into that statistic as well because he was a factor in the first half of the season. In terms of minutes played, they had 17,000 total minutes played last year. 64% of those minutes are returning. So it's not like they lost space. It's not like they're filling the gap with starter equivalent minutes across the board, although there is a starter position to fill. They're looking for the guys there to take the minutes they have and step up and then provide backfill of that with depth. And that's where guys like Doug McDermott and Thad Young, if he's on this team, and Zach Collins, if he can get healthy, like there's all these good pieces out there to provide that depth as well. So, I mean, looking at the starting lineup, for instance, too, who fits the best with the core four that starts? And I'm thinking outside of this fifth guy, it would be DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Keldon Johnson, and Jakob Poeltl. Who's the guy to slide in there between this rotation they have built?
I think there are two names that jump to mind that would probably be best and offer the best plug and play basketball, and that's Doug McDermott and Thad Young, and they offer completely different things, which I think is a really nice thing that the Spurs are going to probably do some mixing and matching and seeing what works and what doesn't.
They offer two fantastic nicknames off the bat: Dougie Buckets, Thaddeus Johnson.
Right. I mean, and both are really good at what they do. Doug McDermott, I was watching him today, and everybody knows he's a shooter. All right, yeah, he's got the elbow tucked, to create and cool. He's awesome getting to the rim.
Yeah.
He's a really underrated finisher, and it's a lot of layups like that. He can dunk though. He'll cram it on somebody, and he's gotten better as a rebounder. He's not the best defender, but a team defender.
Yeah.
Understands where he's got to be, and I mean some numbers for McDermott here: 39% from three last year. 57% of all of his attempts come without a dribble. And on those attempts, he shoots 79% on two-pointers and 38% from three. Another quarter of his attempts come with just one dribble. and that's 65% from 2 and 45% from 3. Efficiency drops a little bit after that, but like, think the way Klay Thompson moves and shoots without the basketball, and like similar size profile.
Yeah.
And that's how McDermott, and his one dribble off the catch is so ridiculous. Like, because he'll come from the corner off a screen up to the top and catch it. And as he's catching the ball, he knows if he's going to stop right there and launch a 3, quick release, or take one step past the defender and like throw the ball through the gap in the defense, and then like super long strides, chase the ball, get after it, and he's at the rim already.
Yeah.
And like just a master at moving without the ball, creating angles for himself. He's a great cutter without it. With or without a screen, he finds open spots on the floor. His shot prep is great. And, you know, just as a replacement for DeMar DeRozan in this lineup, he's a completely different offensive player. Like the exact opposite, essentially.
Yeah.
Where DeMar is a guy who thrives with the ball in his hands, creating for other people, doesn't really space the floor much, but like, you know, dribble, post game, like running pick and roll, finding teammates, stuff like that. Doug McBuckets is a finisher. Like, I mean, he gets buckets. It's his full government.
It's in his namesake,
Douglas
exactly.
McBuckets.
I mean, if you were kind of describing the template for what the Spurs wanted LaMarcus Aldridge to do at the beginning of last season, it's probably what McDermott does, right? It's the guy who spaces the floor, maybe a little more catch and shoot than you were expecting from Aldridge, but I mean...
Yeah, I mean, McBuckets is faster.
Yeah.
Like, he's faster and smaller, but like they wanted to basically turn LaMarcus Aldridge into a pick and pop big man. I don't know how much that Doug is going to be setting screens so much as he's going to be running like off of them, and that's the thing, right? Is so he helps with the spacing a lot, but in terms of some of the other areas that the Spurs needed help with, rebounding, defense, he's not really moving the needle in that regard. And you know, is he playing small 4 or is Keldon playing small 4? Because one of them is going to be, and Keldon, especially with DeMar out now, it seems to make more sense for him to play the 3. And, you know, there are some teams where you're going to need a little more size. And, like, that's why I think that Thad Young is another really interesting piece who could be, I think would be a very serviceable starting power forward for this team in more of a traditional power forward role.
If Thad Young is on the roster October 20th, as it was first game, starting the season, I mean, there's an argument he's the most talented guy on this team.
So 2K would agree with you.
Yeah.
Like, I think that he's the highest rated 2K. He might be the oldest player on the roster.
Yeah, I think he's
well.
33.
Yeah, 32 or 33.
Yeah.
More like Thaddeus Old.
Oh, boy.
I'm sorry. 30, that's not old. But, okay, another funny thing with Thaddeus Johnson here. 5 players in NBA history who have played 800 games, scored 13.5 points per game, 5.9 rebounds per game, 1.4 steals, 49% from the floor, 30% from 3. Name them.
I mean, that's oddly specific stat lines. 5.9, 1.6.
Shout out to Fox Sports.
Well, clearly
Indiana.
Larry Legend.
Yes.
Because he is Larry Legend.
Yes.
Magic Johnson, the other guy to share the namesake with Thagic there. I mean, we're talking the GOATs. So I'm going to throw Jordan in there, Michael Jordan.
Right.
Wilt is the 4th. I don't know who the 4th guy is.
It's LeBron, actually.
Okay.
But
that makes sense. The other GOAT, yeah. The GOAT I
Right.
forget about.
And then the 5th guy is Thad Young. So you got Magic Johnson's passing ability, Larry Bird's irrational confidence, Michael's killer instinct, and LeBron's build, and boom, Thaddeus Johnson, baby. In all seriousness, though, this guy is good. Like, it was a weird. Like, obviously the numbers are funny and very very tailored to Thad Young, but it's indicative that he does a lot of different things good. And the one stat that wasn't on there was assists. And last year, he really grew as a passer.
Yeah.
the Bulls kind of used him as a hub at the top of the key, and he was really good on short rolls as well. Just breaking down the defense, finding the open man. Mark Schindler on Twitter had a really good film breakdown on that, so go check that out. But I mean, he's going to bring defense. He's going to bring rebounding. He is going to bring energy and veteran experience. And he can space the floor, although he did take a step back a little bit in that regard in Chicago.
Yeah.
But, even if you just stick him in the corner and the defense can't quite just leave him there and let him shoot,
Yeah.
That provides spacing and more of the other stuff than McDermott brings. So I think it's a interesting choose your own adventure here.
I mean, you've got two really good options. I mean, I think maybe they split the difference, that both of them kind of play about the same amount of minutes per game, kind of getting that rotation depending on how the game goes, the flow of the game. The Spurs aren't a team to tinker with the starting five unless they need to based on injury, but they're not playing matchups off that. They will play matchups in game, though. They will kind of slide who's playing that. So I could see that coming out, being the way that works between Thad Young and Doug McDermott, if Thad Young is on the roster. Still not official.
And then the wild card, I think, is a guy like Luka.
Yeah.
Right? Who, he's got the size, he's got skill, he's grown in strength, he's a good two-way player.
Yeah.
We saw some really excellent defense and limited opportunities from Luka Šamanić last year. But the question is, how ready is he?
Yeah.
Is he healthy with that hand, and is he ready for, it's his third year in the NBA now. Is he ready for consistent minutes? And we'll just have to wait and see on that.
It feels like there's a lot of clamoring around Luka Šamanić. This is the season. He's got to make the jump. I mean, is this too soon? He was always going to be a prospect, always going to be a developmental kind of guy, building on that raw skills, raw talent he has. Should the Spurs give him 5 years to kind of really mold into that role, or are we really banking it on right now and maybe the next season as well?
I mean, I think it's a big year for him.
Yeah.
But I think also if it's not a big year for him, then it's not as big a deal.
Yeah.
Because that was always the plan with him, and we've heard Brian Wright talk about long runways, and the getting these guys early and working with them. And I mean, when they drafted Luka Šamanić, I was like, the optimist in me was like, I mean, maybe there's a chance he turns into Croatian Kevin Durant, but I never thought he's going to be sliding with guards on the perimeter.
Yeah.
That was not a thought that entered my brain, and we saw him doing that last year. So I mean, I'm still high on his potential, and I still I don't know if we'll know this year, but I do think it is a big year for him. It's a big opportunity for him.
Yeah, the steps that Šamanić took on defense last year were quite the surprise, and provided a lot of optimism for what he could be. I think in the same regards, Keldon Johnson also had moments where he showed defensive prowess, namely against shorter Luka, shutting down Luka Doncic, which is not easy to do, but one of those guys who could do that and just also bring that energy. I do see the long runway picture here, but I also feel I could see why Spurs fans may feel the pressure to see results from him, because we're seeing, I mean, the way Primo played in Summer League, that was a guy also touted as a long runway, but again, also Summer League, but we talked about last week, showed a lot more promise, I think, right out the jump than Šamanić did. So when you're looking at long runway guys, it's not fair to compare them, but I could see Spurs fans being like, whoa, we're seeing a lot more from Primo already than we were at Šamanić at this time.
Right. The thing is, with a project, it's not just that he's a project player, it's that he's a 6'11" project player who they drafted because he's got face-up game.
Yeah.
If he can be a legit triple threat guy and play defense and play switching defense, that's unicorn stuff, And so, I don't want to say it's easier for Primo to be doing that at 6'6", but you see more of that. You see more ability to handle from guards who are, among the shorter NBA players. So when you have a guy who's 6'11" with all this potential, and he still does have a ton of potential, he's 21 this year?
Yeah.
So, Yeah. I think it's going to be his best year, obviously. But if his best year isn't like earth-shattering, I don't think they're going to give up on him. I think they're going to see what they get next year.
At the very least, this will be the year so far with the most opportunities. Like this roster is built where he's going to have playing time.
And it's that way for everybody.
Exactly. So. I mean, you were talking about the depth this team has. With Luka on the second unit, alongside guys like Trey Jones, Lonnie Walker, maybe one of Thaddeus Young or Doug McDermott on that side as well. I mean, and then, of course, they got Jock Landale, who was the sleeper signing. Maybe Zach Collins when he's healthy coming off the bench as well. Like, this is a pretty deep team. You know, the second unit is pretty formidable, all things considered, when you look at it on the bigger picture here, stacked up against other second units. You know, Doug McDermott, to me, is the guy who I think should slide into that starting rotation compared to, you know, guys like Luka or Thaddeus Young. I mean, you mentioned the finishing at the rim. You mentioned the three-point prowess. Of course, not a great defender. He's about what DeMar DeRozan was in terms of what he's going to give you on the defensive side, which means that he's got some hustle to him. But at the same time, too, like if he's the fifth worst defender on the floor alongside guys like DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Keldon Johnson, and Jakob Poeltl, that's okay. They can cover some bases there in the same way they did for DeMar. You know, right. This was a team that was good defensively for stretches, you know, with those guys on the floor. I predicted a career year for McDermott. I think this is a great signing for the Spurs. If he gets 14 points per game, that's the most he's ever gotten in his career on the NBA level. Last year, he was 12.6 in what was a career year for him already. So he's going to keep on building on that. He's a guy who wants to be here, who saw the opportunity to be here, can really grow and flourish in that role and what he brings. And I'm just excited to see him. Yeah. And we'll see what happens as the season unfolds.
And he talked about, you know, growing up watching the Spurs and, you know, wanting to be a part of that system and like wanting to be a system player. Yeah. And not a lot of people like want that label, like because it's used to detract a lot of the time. But like Spurs love him a system player, you know, because I mean seriously, go watch the way that this guy moves without the basketball. If you know. Anybody who plays the sport of basketball can learn from watching Doug McDermott play.
Is he the best off-ball guy the Spurs have had since, I don't know, Danny Green, another guy who was just a complete hustle, cutting, constantly on the move, cutting across the floor, things like that? That's kind of what, as you were describing him, playing, kind of rolling off the screens there and things like that, and what he does off the ball, that was the first name that jumped to my mind.
I think that's probably a good comp. And the difference is Danny Green was a lockdown defender, and Doug McBuckets can put the ball on the floor one time really well.
Yeah.
And, you know, create advantages going the other way. So, and just in terms of the fit, like him with that unit, you want a guy who doesn't need the ball. And I don't think Thad Young needs the ball in his hand either. But you have a guy who is constantly moving, constantly pulling the defense away from the rim.
Yeah.
And I think that everybody on this Spurs team can benefit from playing with Doug McBuckets, who's a veteran, who's like, you know, bringing a lot of experience.
9th season in the league, 8th season, something like that.
Something like that.
It's pretty wild. Now, a name I forgot to mention when naming off the second unit guys was Bryn Forbes. We're sure he's a second unit guy. He's not a starter. You're not seeing him sliding into the starting role like he did in his last season with the Spurs.
I just can't see it happening.
No.
I mean, like, think of it like a pit stop in a race, right? Like he was third. He went and did his own thing, won a championship, came back on the track, and now he's probably 8th, I would say. And like the other cars are going faster.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing was like 2 years ago, I was in the camp that was like Lonnie should be getting these Bryn minutes. And it was a lot murkier then about like, you know, was Lonnie ready for that? My argument was get him ready by giving him the minutes. That's the only way you get ready is if you play.
Yeah.
It's been a year of development for Lonnie since then. He played 25 minutes a game last year. I can't see Bryn's minutes eating into Lonnie's, really. I think they'll probably come at the expense of Trey Jones, who had, I think, a really great summer league, deserving of an all-summer league team, snubbed, whatever. Not mad about it. It's not something I was even thinking about.
It's not taped to your wall or anything like that, no.
We are mad though. But like, I think that Bryn coming off the bench in that role is going to be really solid.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of the bench as well, if DeRozan was the biggest piece to replace, and we've talked about the methods the Spurs will go about doing that with the roster they have, losing Patty Mills mean they lost like the primary ball handler with the second unit. Did Lonnie solidify himself as that guy? Is that where we're trending?
I think so.
Yeah.
We might see Lonnie Walker as the point guard of that second unit and Bryn next to him, and, you know, Trey getting minutes when one of them needs an off night or whatever. Or, you know, if Bryn's getting cooked, they put in guy who won Defensive Player of the Year for the ACC in college.
Yeah.
It's pretty, like, I think that, you know, fifth guard is going to be pretty matchup dependent. And I think it's pretty solid because you've got two guys who do very different things. Like one guy who's a pure shooter and one guy who's way better at everything else, and then still trying to get that shooting part down.
Yeah.
And they've got very similar, like, you know, size. Like, people always talk about Bryn Forbes' size. He's 6'3".
Yeah.
You know, he's not teeny tiny. And, you know, similar packages but do wildly different things on the court. So I'm excited to see the different things that we see there. I just can't see Bryn eating into Lonnie's minutes anymore.
I'm with you there. I mean, it's Lonnie is a great guy in the same way that this is the reason why Ben Simmons would fit on a team built for Ben Simmons. With that second unit, and that's not where Ben Simmons would play on the Spurs perspectively if they ever brought him in, but on that second unit, Lonnie Walker gets to be the guy to slash and then kick. And this team suddenly has kickers, right? They got the people to catch the ball between, Vassell, between Bryn Forbes. If Wieskamp finds a way onto the roster too, he's another sharpshooter who's gone on a two-way contract. But and then if it's McDermott in the second unit, he's another guy to spread the floor. This is a roster built.
Jock Landale. In the words of Jock Landale, can shoot the piss out of the ball.
It reminds me of 2 years ago, maybe, or 3 years ago, where the Spurs had polar opposite lineups. Right, the starting five was a slow pace, kind of methodical. It's either going to be DeRozan on the elbow, or it's going to be Aldridge posting you up, or Aldridge in the two, like taking a long two. Like, that team was built to slow it down and slow the pace down and score the way they're best to score. And that bench was one of the highest scoring benches in the league. It was a 3-point shooting bench, played with pace, played with intensity. That feels like what this bench is built for again. But at the same time, the first unit can do that as well now. So.
Right. I think it's going to be a faster Spurs team that we see this year. And I think it's going to be better defensively.
Yeah.
Part of that is going to be starting the season with Jakob Poeltl back there anchoring the defense. Something that, last season, the first, until LaMarcus Aldridge was off the team, was a struggle in pretty much every defensive scenario. And, it's different with Yak, who, behind Gobert is one of the best 3 or 4 big men in the game defensively.
Yeah.
So, he's up there with guys like Capella, and, he contests a ton of shots. He's really long at the rim, really quick on his feet for somebody who's 7'1" and that strong. I think it's going to be a big year for Jakob Poeltl as well.
Yeah. A lot of excitement that we talked about here in terms of the shape here. Still might be a little lower of a bar in terms of success, but that's who we think, how the roster will shape up. We want to hear your opinion as well, who slides into that starting position as well. We'll put a graphic up on the Big Fun Pod Twitter at Big Fun Pod, so please weigh in on that, and we'll share the results with you guys next time we get together. Tom, you cooking on anything for the digital side here? What you got in the books here?
I'm doing a lot of research because it's still a coin flip for me, Thad Young or Doug McDermott. I really want to break down all of the film that I can find on these guys because, not just new faces on the Spurs, but new faces that I think are going to make a pretty significant impact.
Yeah.
If assuming that Thad Young is on the team, they're good players. They're good players who fit a lot of the needs that the Spurs have, and I'm excited. I'm excited to watch them both work here. But yeah, I really want to dive into who's the better choice and have a stronger answer. I want to come to a definitive opinion on that.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be the next thing you see from me.
Great. Well, keep an eye out for Tom's deep dive on the new faces of the Spurs at Kins5.com. Of course, Kins5 is the home of the Big Fundamental podcast, and Kins5 is the official TV station of the San Antonio Spurs. That's Tom Petrini. I'm Jackson Floyd. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you for listening.
Peace.